Should I start, Maggie?
I think we're gonna wait a few minutes and let everybody in.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I see lots of people trickling in. We'll wait maybe till 12:02 or 12:03 to get started.
Okay.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're just taking a few minutes and waiting for everyone to join. Okay, everyone, we're just waiting another 1 minute and we're gonna get started, just letting the audience trickle in, and we'll get started at 12:03. All right, Martha, I think you can take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Maggie. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a true pleasure to welcome you to the final showcase and award ceremony for the Bridging Divides Migration Data Challenge. This is the first ever Migration Data Challenge at TMU. We've never done this, so we're really excited for what's going to happen in the next few hours. Before we begin today's event, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we gather. As an immigrant to Canada, originally from Zimbabwe, I offer this land acknowledgement not as a formality, but as a recognition of my responsibility as a newcomer to this land and its history. Toronto is situated in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share this territory and care for the land together. It reminds us that we each have a role in ensuring that the Dish, which is the land, remains plentiful and protected for future generations. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all of us newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. This land is also home to many other diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, and it continues to be a place of gathering and exchange. As someone who has come to this country in search of opportunity, I recognize that this opportunity exists because of the stewardship and resilience of Indigenous peoples. It is a privilege to work and live here, and it comes with the responsibility to honor the past, to listen, and to act in solidarity with Indigenous communities. As we gather here today for the Migration Data Challenge, a space where we explore questions of access, equity, and belonging, let us do so grounded in respect for the original stewards of the land. Let this acknowledgement be more than words. Let it be a call to deeper learning and meaningful action. Okay, without further ado, we're just going to jump right into a few remarks about the challenge. So over the past weeks, we've witnessed the power of data, collaboration, and creativity come together in remarkable ways. This challenge was designed to push boundaries, bringing together an interdisciplinary group of undergraduate and graduate students from fields such as data science, engineering, economics, sociology, and more to explore critical questions around access to services, and facilities for immigrants, temporary residents, and Canadian-born individuals. Our aim was to engage students in working with underutilized, yet incredibly rich Statistics Canada datasets to uncover insights that are too often overlooked. And you guys really delivered. We're really, really impressed with what came out from looking at some of the preliminary submissions. The work that will be presented today demonstrates not only technical excellence and analytical depth, but also a deep understanding of the human realities behind the data. It's not just numbers, they're actually humans behind all this statistics. To all the students who participated in the Migration Data Challenge, thank you. Your energy, creativity, and commitment have been truly inspiring. You have shown us the potential of using data, not just to inform policy, but to drive meaningful, inclusive change as well. I'd like to express heartfelt thanks to Maggie, who believed she could and did. Uh, Shout out to her. This has been her initial. This was the initial idea, and she has seen it through to completion with the support of the incredible team at Bridging Divides, who also made this possible. Your dedication, coordination, and mentorship have been invaluable throughout this journey. A special thank you goes to our mentors as well, whose guidance and feedback helped shape and elevate the students' work at every stage. Your generosity in sharing your time and expertise has been invaluable. And finally, we are deeply grateful to our sponsor, the Master in Engineering, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship, for their generous support. Shout out to Tarek, who's online. Your commitment to fostering innovation and advancing evidence-based approaches in the migration space is what made this initiative possible. So for everyone online, for yourself and your friends and your relatives, you need to enroll in the Master in Engineering, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship so that we can continue to have this migration data challenge. As we move into today's presentations and celebrate the hard work of these talented students, we also look ahead to new insights, new questions, and new directions for the research they've started. Congratulations to all the participants. We're proud of what you've accomplished and excited to see what's going to come next. Enjoy the showcase.
Thank you so much, Martha. So now let's turn to the competition. Over 350 people applied and 25 incredible teams submitted their entries. Today, we're excited to showcase the top 10 finalists who are competing for $10,000 in prizes and an incredible opportunity to present their work at an IRCC open house. So I want to echo Martha's words in thanking the judges and the mentors for their selfless contributions. This challenge would not be possible without you, and I am so immensely grateful for your time and the expertise that you have shared with these teams. Before we do start the presentations, I do want to introduce Tarek Sadek, Executive Director of the Center for Engineering, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship, who's generously sponsored the prizes. Tarek, we are so grateful for your support, and please would like to invite you to say a few words about the program.
Oh, sure. So yeah, thank you. So the Master of Engineering Entrepreneurship, it's a 16 months program to help basically students and entrepreneurs use technologies to solve problems. And I just want to say a couple of words about why we love your initiative as well, Maggie, and how we see we need more of that. Really, I'm honored to be here. I believe the idea of bridging divides, moving from different places, diverse points, even different provinces here, coming from different backgrounds, and now you started to share understanding and you came up with groundbreaking solutions, I hope, to the problems that we have right now. And we love that in our program. And we believe the best students who have been, the best students that we had are the people who have critical thinking. Because as you know, in migration data, we have lots of information, we have lots of data, but we need your deep understanding. We need the ethical consideration, and we need you to be innovative and coming up with solutions. So And we have examples of that. Like, for example, if you ask AI, should social media be regulated or not? AI will give you pros and cons, neutral, very well structured, but summary of things. But you, the human critical thinking, you will go deeper. And that's what we need. That's why we like to sponsor programs like this. You can consider democratic values. The power of asymmetries, historical analysis, fundamental freedom of speech, many things that AI even helped me to come up with. You can bring new insights. And that's what we're looking for. And the moral position, a unique perspective from where you are also coming from. This depth of understanding and the idea that we can connect together and we'll discuss, and that's what this platform allows us to do, is very much needed. Now, with this critical thinking, and if you have entrepreneurial mindset, which means you're willing to deal with uncertainty, you're willing to take on the burden of taking your idea and making it happen, please come and explore the master's program, explore also the zone learning at Team U. If you're Team U students, I can tell you I work with my colleagues in your own institutions as well, who will be more than happy to help you support, take your ideas to the market. And in general, we need people like yourself, critical thinking, entrepreneurial, know about technology, use them to solve our problem. It's not about building cool tech. Again, it's about meaningful tech. So again, I'm very thankful for your work. I'm thankful for the opportunity to sponsor this. And if any one of you is considering taking the idea forward, please come and talk with us or anyone who has the similar role in your own institution. Thank you, and I do apologize if I took more than the time allocated. Thanks, Maggie. Thanks, Marta, for the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Tarek. So without further ado, now we're going to watch 10 presentations. This competition was open to teams from all the Bridging Divides partner universities. So University of Alberta, TMU, Concordia, and UBC. The teams that you will be watching are composed of students from interdisciplinary programs, a multitude of programs. They're mixed teams. We have undergrad students, we have master's students, we have PhD students. And yeah, so this really, I think, is a truly special competition. And I won't waste any more of your time. I can't wait to see what the students have come up with. Our first team, Team TEAA, is from the University of Alberta. So Temi and Iola Amarachi, take it away.
Okay, what does fairness really look like? Are we really delivering it to immigrant communities? Good day, everyone. We are Temi, and Yolan Amarachi, and today we're excited to discuss our findings on the topic of gender disparities in living standards and access to essential services among African immigrants in Canada. Now, why does this matter? Behind every data point, we have real lives. There's individuals and families all navigating the challenges of settlement and integration into new cultures and traditions in a foreign country. As African women and international students ourselves, this research isn't just academic, it's personal. Our lived experiences shaped the care, intentionality, and perspective we brought to bear in this research. Our findings reveal the structural backgrounds, including including caregiving burdens and access to essential services on paper, don't always necessarily translate to access in reality. So please join us as we pull together policies and research findings to redefine a more equitable future for all African immigrants in Canada.
For our methodology, we used R Commander and Excel to explore the disparities in standard of living and access to essential services. We drew on data from Statistics Canada, IRCC, and other sources to get our findings. These tools allowed us to process both provided and external data sets, helping us to calculate weighted access scores and create graphs to visualize income trends, which helped us better understand the gender-based disparities. Our analysis revealed striking income disparities between male and female African immigrants in Canada. Over the 5-year period we studied, women consistently earned between 13.5% to 49.5% less than men. Even as both groups experienced rising incomes due to exposure to larger occupational areas, growing entrepreneurship, and integration into the Canadian workforce, women continue to earn significantly less. We also analyzed access to essential services such as healthcare, education, and employment using both public transportation and walkability scores, and we discovered mainly minor differences. Women had slightly better access to education services via public transport and walking, while men had marginally better access to employment and healthcare services. Age-specific analysis showed that for immigrants aged 45 and above, healthcare access was much better via transit than walking, with minimal gender gaps. A similar pattern can be observed for access to educational facilities among children aged 5 to 14. Overall, African immigrant men and women have low spatial access to these essential services compared to the other immigrant communities living in Canada, like the Asian community, for example, which have slightly better weighted access scores.
Now, while access to services like transit, healthcare, or education may appear equal at first glance, our findings do reveal a much deeper truth, which is that outcomes truly do remain unequal, especially for immigrant women who balance caregiving responsibilities with their families and face compounded systemic barriers that are inherent in society. These disparities are not merely about access, but reflects existing gaps in support, recognition, and opportunity. Now, to move from access to true equity, we must go way beyond infrastructure and invest in culturally competent healthcare through community outreach and multilingual mental health services, embed subsidized childcare and settlement programs, and establish gender responsive employment pathways with mentorships. Transit equity measures such as low-income newcomer fare programs and improved service in underserved areas can also be implemented. Additionally, government should also look into reforming data practices to disaggregate by gender, race, and immigration status for more informed policymaking. Equity must be shaped by the communities that it serves, and real change begins when we all commit to building systems that not only open doors, but empower each and every single one of us to walk through them and thrive.
We hope you've been able to get a better understanding of what fairness should look like for immigrant communities, and we look forward to collaborating with you to redefine a more equitable future for these communities. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Team TEAA. After each presentation, we're going to have one of the judges who have analyzed your work give you some feedback. So a few words from Ron Sampson.
Hi, everyone. That was a really good presentation. I really liked your research questions and everything. It was very clear. The methodology was sound. Everything was straightforward. Presentation was clear, easy to understand. The results, the conclusions were really thoughtful and mindful of some of the inequities and some of the approaches to approach at them. The only feedback I would say is to highlight more about maybe a further dissection or analysis of other groups and kind of that gap, which I know there was one slide on, but more kind of charts and articulating some of the differences in that. But really good work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so on to our second presentation. Our second presentation is going to be by Tail Lab Migration Matrix from Toronto Metropolitan University. So over to you, Cassandra, Vaishali, and Sadeh.
Okay, today I'm going to be presenting our work that investigates how geographic disparities in transit and childcare shape employment outcomes. The Greater Toronto Area is home to a diverse demographic landscape with over 50% of its residents being foreign-born. Many newcomers face barriers in accessing essential services due to geographic disparities. Sustainable urban development in the GTA is a critical component to overcome inequalities in geographic access. Limited access to affordable childcare and reliable transit options could affect the types of jobs that newcomers accept and could delay workforce entry. Since Toronto has the most expensive transit system in Canada, it is crucial to investigate and adapt public policy to support the integration and economic mobility of immigrants. Our main research question reviews how geographic disparities in transit accessibility and childcare centers impact employment opportunities for immigrants in the GTA. Through our analysis, we aim to understand how trends in childcare accessibility and transit shape workforce participation and drive economic mobility. We seek to quantify the availability and geographic accessibility of licensed childcare centers across the GTA with high immigrant populations, and we would like to generate policy-relevant insights that can inform targeted support for underserved immigrant communities. As part of our methodology, we used a mixed method approach for our analytical framework. Our data collection phase consisted of surveys, open data sources, and policy and program information. The quantitative analysis consisted of a chloroplast map, heat map, regression, and time series predictive model. Finally, our qualitative analysis aimed to uncover historical trends, policy effectiveness, and legislative priorities. We began by reviewing the density of immigrants in the GTA by their place of birth and the availability of public transit in these regions. The areas with the highest immigrant populations are characterized by the dark blue regions in Brampton, Mississauga, and Oshawa. Notably, transit availability in Oshawa is considerably limited as compared to other regions. Ensuring adequate transit and childcare coverage between these regions should drive economic opportunity for new immigrants. Within the GTA, Toronto has the largest employment hub and the highest employment concentration with 1.45 million jobs in 2021. Childcare centers and transit options both have the highest density within the downtown core. However, transit interconnectivity within the neighboring regions in the GTA remains sparse. Although the Canada Public Transit Fund aims to expand transit nationally, it is imperative to track progress with data-driven evaluation to ensure that transit expansion meaningfully improves access to employment hubs for equitable accessibility. We reviewed employment trends in immigrant and Canadian-born groups with respect to significant events and program launches. We paired a t-test with a regression model to determine statistically significant trend as a result of provincial childcare subsidy reform and national Canada-wide early learning and childcare programs. A significant impact was observed for immigrants who have been in Canada for 5 to 10 years. Provincial legislation can be further revised to strengthen collaboration with municipalities to increase childcare funding in high-demand areas and prioritize transit-connected childcare hubs near employment centers with incentive to open centers in underserved areas. To understand inequalities, we identified trends in employment composition according to various immigrant groups. Consistent with our findings from program releases, the majority of groups saw a positive trend in employment rate from 2021. However, additional support for those who have arrived within 5 years could improve current employment rates. Looking forward, we developed a predictive ARIMA model to forecast full-time employment by immigration status with 95% confidence intervals. Workforce participation is expected to grow, and continued revision to policy is essential to create accessible, equitable, and economically strong cities. Future initiatives should strive to introduce cross-sector collaboration to align transit and childcare policies. On behalf of the Thai Lab Migration Matrix team, we would like to thank the organizers and mentors for a wonderful event, and we would be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Thai Lab. So a little feedback from Haijan from IR.
Thank you very much. I think this is a very well presented and highly policy relevant study. I find it both very interesting and innovative, especially in the how it's connected, as I say, a spatial disparity to the labor market outcome. However, I have a couple of main concerns regarding the time series model you use to forecast your employment trends. Especially, I see some issue with the applying to the autographic integrated moving average model here. Firstly, I say is you're working. I see from the paper I see you're working with only about 13 years of annual data. So for the time series model, especially for the autographic model, this is quite a small data set. It's quite limited, I say. So with such a short series, I will say maybe there's a potential risk of an unstable estimate. Maybe you can mention that in your study. And the second, your time series period also includes a major structure change. I'm glad you also saw that. So pandemic and roughly from 2020 to 2023. So your model rely on this assumption that the past pattern can predict the future trend, but when the series contain a sharp structural change like the pandemic, I would say maybe you have to further clarify or discuss these kind of limitations. But anyway, overall, I think it's very, very interesting, and your study contribution is very strong and innovative. Maybe you can consider to add in some clarification about the concern about the time series model. But overall, I think a great job. Well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. So now, if you're not going to respond, then we can proceed with the next team, which is Error 404, Data Not Found from the University of Alberta. So I invite Kareem, RJ, and Labiba.
Thank you, Maggie. Hi, everyone. We are Error 404, Data Not Found. My name is RJ. I'm here with Kareem and Labiba, and today we're going to be myth-busting the housing crisis, rethinking how immigrants relate to the current housing shortages in Canada. So if you've been around Canadian media in the past year or so, I'm sure you've heard the headlines about the housing shortages in Canada, the limited access to social services, and as well as the high numbers of immigrants that have been brought into the country. If you start to take a look at headlines from popular Canadian media, you'll see that these issues start to blend themselves together, and people start blaming immigrants for the lack of housing and access to social services in Canada. This creates a negative connotation that has further negative impacts on immigrants in Canada, influencing the way that we make policy, public opinion, and so on. So in our project here, we focused our research question around how public transit access to workplace and post-secondary facilities affects a relationship between immigrants and social housing usage.
So to start off, we plotted a heat map of the correlations between variables of interest that we obtained from 3 different data sets. First 2 were the profile and spatial access data sets that we obtained from the competition. And the last one was the housing data set based on the 2021 census from Statistics Canada. And then our attention was drawn to the high correlation between the number of immigrants and the number of people in subsidized housing. So we decided to pursue this a little bit further. We did 2 analysis scenarios. In the first one, we looked at the simple Pearson R correlations between absolute number of immigrants and the number of people in subsidized housing per area. So that Pearson R was 0.7 for immigrants and social housing, which is a pretty strong correlation. And similarly, for the non-immigrant population, we got a correlation of 0.66. This difference between immigrants and non-immigrants is pretty big in comparison to the non-social housing condition, where the numbers were 0.66 and 0.65. But is this statistically significant? To do this, we did a Fisher R to Z transformation to find out, and we found that indeed it was statistically significant. So it's confirmed. Let's take this to our media outlet and let them know that immigrants are the cause of the housing crisis, and you can take me away. Or we can dive into this a little bit further and try to figure out what really is the story.
So we speculated that maybe the strong correlation that we're seeing is just immigrant numbers and social housing usage. They're just going up together because both numbers are aspects of like busy metropolitan areas. So what we did was we looked at two access variables that are also markers of busy metropolitan areas. So transit access to places of employment and transit access to post-secondary facilities. And yeah, there is definitely a positive correlation between subsidized housing and transit access, like we would expect out of metropolitan areas. In scenario 2 of our analysis, we used proportional data instead of absolute numbers. So, so the proportion of immigrants in an area with the proportion of subsidized housing used by immigrants. And what we found was pretty interesting. So basically in scenario 2, the higher immigrant proportion in an area, the less social housing is taken up by immigrants. This is completely different from what we saw when we used absolute numbers in scenario 1. And in the red here, so we see that 0.7, that's the initial correlation that we got. And when we use proportional data, we got negative 0.18. So you can definitely see that it's a pretty big difference. So let's jog back to what we saw in scenario 1. We saw a strong positive correlation. So how much of this is due to immigrants though? When we did the multiple regression model, we saw that when taking out all the effects from the access variables, the immigrant population effects are statistically insignificant on social housing. So meaning the correlation wasn't strong because of immigrant numbers, they were strong due to other factors. So it could pretty much be interpreted as immigrants, so it could be pretty much interpreted as immigrants are more likely to settle in high traffic areas. So why are these results important and to who? Well, first of all, this shows that any data can be misleading. The first scenario we saw obviously didn't show the whole picture, but can be interpreted poorly by the general public. And secondly, when we start to address issues in a more nuanced way, it allows policymakers and people in government to implement changes that address these social problems rather than perpetuate a narrative that may not have been there or may not have been as strong as we initially thought. And that concludes our presentation.
Excellent. Ron, did you want to pop in for some feedback?
Yeah, I thought this is a really strong project. I like the narrative of it. I like that you're asking critical questions that are on the minds of many Canadians and newcomers. I like the way that you dig deeper into the questions and controlled. I like the methodology. I thought it was really sound, really clear. Presentation was clean. Everything was, it was a very solid work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. So our next presentation is from the data challengers from Toronto Metropolitan University. So Monica, Arthi, and Tintu, take it away.
Thank you, Maggie. Hello, everyone. Today, our team data challengers will be presenting our findings on how amenity disparities shape migration and regional equity in Canada. This is the agenda for our presentation. Canada is the second largest country in the world. In this study, we analyzed data from 2021 census. Most of Canada's population resides mainly in 4 provinces: Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia, and Alberta. This trend is similar for immigrants as well, with 88% of recent immigrants primarily residing in these provinces. But do we have enough facilities to meet the needs of all 37 million people? To explore this, we studied data sets on healthcare and cultural arts facilities. Canada has around 7,000 health facilities and 8,000 cultural arts facilities. However, the per capita access to these facilities varies across provinces. Canada is divided into 199 geographical areas, of which 62 have access to less than 1 health facility per 10,000 people, and 37 have access to fewer than 1 cultural arts facility for 10,000 people. In territories, per capita access to cultural facilities is higher. Since territories fall under non-census metropolitan areas, we shifted our focus to analyze the proximity of various services in these rural areas. Our central idea is to analyze disparities in access to essential services across metropolitan influence zones and territories to better understand how immigration patterns vary in Canada. What are non-CMA regions? Non-census metropolitan areas include metropolitan influence zones and territories. They cover 96% of Canada's land area, but only house 16% of its population, just 4% of whom are immigrants. Each province has 4 MIC categories: strong, moderate, weak, and no metropolitan influence zones, based on how many people commute to nearby metropolitan areas for work. Our primary hypothesis was to determine whether territories have greater proximity to services than weak or no metropolitan zones. Despite having smaller population, as you can see, territories show higher proximity to post-secondary education compared to other non-CMA regions. For the remaining services, their proximity is comparable to that of strong metropolitan influence zones. This suggests that enhancing access to certain facilities and promoting more businesses in these territorial cities could position them as future employment hubs for immigrants.
Yes, these zones are not left behind. In comparison with no and weakly urban influence zones, our territorial centers hold a better access, but it fails to attract immigrants. Families with children often avoid these remote areas due to the concern about cultural integration, limited access to daycare, and the quality of education, while the working adults overlook due to the lack of job diversity, long-term stability, lifestyle adjustment, limited healthcare access, and fewer networking opportunities. So business establishment was discussed here. In the left chart, the densely populated Ontario shows grocery stores dominating over employment sectors, indicating limited job opportunities for potential employees. In contrast, the right chart shows the Northwestern territories with more skilled and professional roles, but needing a better infrastructure and services to attract more residents. So study limitations that we held with, firstly, the access code does not reflect the actual experience. For instance, a nearby grocery store in a crowded area doesn't mean a quick access. Then, the remote areas have limited census data. Additionally, substitution method and advanced imputation method on missing values may not generate 100% accurate results. For consistent measures, we use normalized technique, which yields distortion. Also, this analysis is based on 2021 census data, and it does not predict the future or the current statistics. Even though amenities are discussed, the major ones, but housing affordability, internet access, public safety is out of a project scope. So what is missing between the CMAs and non-CMAs? Land area is huge in non-CMA. There is a scope for employment, decent scope for employment, and scope for various facilities, but still low population. So that could be due to lack of awareness. So our policies include expansion of healthcare infrastructures like telehealth access, recruitment incentives, and so on. Employment initiatives like bridging program, co-op, job readiness, and so on. Immigrant policies like CRS score, higher child benefits, some support, some attractive incentives. Evidence-based learning. So involving these types of learning will help in identifying these service hubs. So we proposed a smart immigration and unified portal, which is similar to a school finder tool in Canada. So this left side indicates the school finder tool, Find My School app, and the right side indicates the MOC. So this is the MOC centralized portal that can link immigrants to nearby services like maybe job boards, government approved employment centers, licensed childcare. Additionally, an AI-driven smart immigration system that guides the newcomers to regions aligned with their profile and promote a balanced settlement and smoother integration in Canada. Together, these policies and unified portal can help new immigrants to relocate to these non-CMA regions, supporting Canada's goal of achieving balanced immigration and sustainable future aligned to the Canada's social development goals, commitments that's falling with 2030. Thank you, and we are open to questions.
Thank you so much. So now Feng Hu from Statistics Canada will provide a little.
Sorry. I particularly like this study for it focuses on different type of rural area. I think very few previous studies have paid a lot of attention to the rural area, particularly in terms of the settlement of immigrants and how we can attract more immigrants to like rural area. And also the study used additional data, use quite sophisticated techniques. So those are all very good. Also, not only limited to study research, but also thinking about like how to transfer the fundings, the studies into some ways they can actually help immigrants directly. So those are very, very good sense. When I read the paper, I think the one thing we probably want a little bit more is so like again, you have like a very strong like data analytics skill. It's like also think like more broadly, like what is the like analytical perspective and how like relatively important in terms of like say, I think in terms of the goal of the study, like is it really realistic? We want to attract more and more immigrants to like a rural area where there's really low, very little employment. So those are kind of questions I would like you to think when you refine your study. Thanks.
Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next team is Team McCrispy from the University of British Columbia. Santing, Jada, Kristen, take it away.
Sorry. Oh, yeah. Imagine being a 10-year-old newcomer in a city full of opportunity. Yet every day, your journey to school takes over an hour because you're far from access. This is the reality for many immigrant children in Greater Vancouver, trapped in what experts call an education desert. This notion was originally developed to describe geographic areas with limited access to higher education, a structural result of the combined effects of various social and economic factors. Amid GVA's growing immigrant population and diversity, we applied the concept of education desert to local primary and secondary schools, looking for signs of unequal access that may widen opportunity gaps between different social groups. Over time, the systematic barrier can slow down population integration and challenge Canada's long-term goals for social equality. That brings us to our key question. Are immigrant children aged 5 to 14 in Greater Vancouver facing structural disadvantages in accessing educational facilities?
To start, we studied the correlation between accessibility to primary and secondary schools and the proportion of immigrants who were 5 to 14 years old when settled in Vancouver. We performed 2 hypothesis tests and used Spearman strength correlation coefficient as our estimator. We concluded that there was enough evidence to support a moderate trend between lower accessibility to schools and a high proportion of young immigrants. We tried to reason the low accessibility by looking at another piece of data about schools in GVA and noticed that Langley has a high number of schools but low accessibility, where both public transit and walking. The low accessibility to schools in Langley might be due to low density of schools and the dispersed population. While the accessibility is low, the proportion of young immigrants in Langley is relatively high. There are several potential reasons for low accessibility to schools for newcomers. First, areas with more affordable housing might be favored by new immigrant families, even though it may take longer to get to schools. An interesting observation is that Maple Ridge, as an area with relatively low accessibility to schools, has a high proportion of young immigrants and more affordable housing. In addition, children may need to visit schools that are further from home due to current school catchment boundaries. Moreover, the infrastructure development can catch up with the rapid growing immigrant population, leading to insufficient educational facilities in high-growth areas.
As for implications,
Low educational accessibility might have more profound impacts on the long-term socioeconomic outcomes of immigrant youth in Western Canada. According to Statistics Canada, those who immigrated at a younger age and under the economic category are actually more likely to achieve better outcomes academically and professionally. Without targeted strategies, however, limited school access due to structural issues could still be a roadblock for their socioeconomic mobility.
Now, let's talk about the policy recommendation. We have three key directions. First, ensuring educational resources keep pace with population changes. We recommend building a cross-departmental coordinated system to ensure school planning is integrated with new community development. Some cities like Surrey and Calgary have already piloted joint youth school community centers, integrating teaching, librarians, and childcare. We suggest standardizing this practice as a part of mainstream education planning. We also recommend using predictive population modeling to assess shift in school-age population and prioritize resource allocation. In high-growth area, government should streamline approval and funding process for schools and use temporary classroom as a short-term solution. Second, flexible mechanism can be considered. School catchment zone often become barriers to resources access. While the VSB does have a catchment review process, it's irregular. We recommend a biannual review cycle to reflect demographic changes and introducing flexible enrollment policies, such as inter-school agreement or dual catchment registration, to reduce exclusions for immigrant family. Community-based support is also important. We suggest scale-up school plus community models, where school facilities remain open after hours to serve as a community learning spaces. These can offer volunteer touring and more, which benefit immigrant family. As we have emphasized, these are not idealistic proposal, but grounded response and proven practice already emerging across Canada. Policies mentioned have already existed in the pilot form. What we propose is to mainstream this practice, moving from temporary to systematic solution. This is a key step towards spatial justice and inclusive education for immigrant children. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tima Christie. So Feng Hu from from Statistics Canada will provide some feedback.
I like this study a lot. Particularly, they focus on ask a very specific question, focus on a very specific population in a local area. So this kind of study, and again, combined with their very good knowledge about the local condition and their use of additional data, I think this is kind of study that can really make a direct impact for a particular like a local local area and for a particular population. Like one suggestion I have is to, when you again, like the audience had no chance to read the paper. When I read the paper, one question I have is like some of the measure you use when you do the analysis. For example, use the proportion of immigrant children 4 to 15 years old. It's not clear what the proportion is. Is the proportion among immigrants or proportion about in the local population? And also, I would like to say like whether the funding you fund among immigrant children also apply to Canadian-born children. But overall, I really like this study.
Thank you for
Thank you.
feedback.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. So our next team is the Nexus Navigators from Toronto Metropolitan University, Lena, Luke, and Thomas.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Thomas, and along with my colleagues Lena and Luke, we are the Nexus Navigators from TMU. Our project involves rethinking deprivation as we answer the question, does accessibility influence outcomes in diverse communities? Well, to answer this question, we must first understand what CIMD is. The Canadian Index of Multiple Deprivation is a metric developed by Statistics Canada to determine disadvantages based in geographical area. They are grouped into these 4 categories: economic dependency, ethnic instability, ethnocultural composition, and situational vulnerability. However, the CIMD's ethnocultural EC and situational vulnerability SV themes are heavily criticized as they may associate immigrants with disadvantages. So what's our hypothesis? Well, we want to explore if good accessibility to services like jobs, healthcare, and education can offset high disadvantages according to the CIMD. By doing this, we intend to determine if EC and SV truly capture deprivation, visually map areas where high deprivation and accessibility meet, and determine what exactly is accessibility. So here are the 4 data sets we used, all sourced from Statistics Canada, by the way. The first 2 are provided by the Bridging Divides Challenge team. They contain demographic and immigration trends and also measure accessibility to key services. The last 2 are the aforementioned CIMD dataset and an ADA, or Aggregate Dissemination Area shapefile. This last dataset allows us to visualize all of our data on every region in Canada between 1980 to 2022.
After aggregating our datasets, we created the Essential Services Accessibility Index, ESAI, a metric combining healthcare, employment, and grocery access via walking and transit. Then we ran correlation tests to quantify relationships in our data. The result? This highly interactive map to represent all of our data across Canada. We can modify this map to show data from different time periods, origin regions of migrants, accessibility modes, data types, and other metrics. Let's look at the migrant distribution in the Toronto area. You can clearly see that certain regions have higher concentrations of migrants, like so. Brampton is known for its high South Asian population, as seen on this pie graph to the side. Below that, it shows the immigrant trends over time. If we want to filter regions further, we can use our filter by quantile feature. As we can see, we are left with the areas in Toronto with the highest concentration of migrants. We also want to clarify a point brought up by a reviewer. According to Stats Canada, only about 15% of migrants who arrived in Canada between 2016 and 2021 were refugees. The vast majority were economic class migrants who are not typically associated with acute vulnerability. For that, we can use these next 2 maps to show.
Let's begin with the first bivariate map, which overlays EC ethnocultural composition score from the CIMD with the Essential Service Accessibility Index that we calculated. What this visualization reveals is critical. High EC scores, often assumed to signal socioeconomic disadvantage, do not uniformly correlate with poor access to essential services. In fact, many highly diverse areas, such as Markham, are migrant-dense and exhibit strong accessibility. In the second map, we examine the relationship between SV, situational vulnerability, and ESAI. Here, the contrast is clearer. Areas with high ESAI more frequently align with lower SV, suggesting that this dimension of deprivation is more structurally tied to service gaps. For example, again, we're going to use Markham. Unlike EC, SV genuinely maps into educational gaps, unemployment, and lone parenting, and our accessibility index often reflects those disparities. These contrasting patterns get to the heart of what the study sets out to do, to challenge one-size-fits-all interpretation of deprivation by incorporating spatial access and migration diversity into the analysis. And it's here one of the reviewer comments becomes especially relevant. Could high accessibility actually be a result of policy response to deprivation? That's a critical hypothesis, but to confirm it, we need temporal comparisons. In other words, we need to look at accessibility scores from 2016, compare them to CIMD scores then and now. Only that kind of longitudinal tracking could tell us whether improved access followed high deprivation flags. Based on our analysis, here is what we recommend. CIMD scores should be interpreted in context, especially the EC dimension. Diversity alone is not a deficit. Accessibility matters, and its inclusion changes how we interpret deprivation. A high CIMD score with high access shouldn't trigger the same policy response as one with low access. Therefore, CIMD scores should not be used alone to allocate resources. And lastly, if we continue to equate terms such as ethnocultural composition with vulnerability and label multicultural success stories as deprived, we risk reinforcing structural biases. With that, we end with this core message. If we want to design equitable policy, we must go beyond broad indices and see communities for what they are, not just how they score. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Lena, Luke, and Thomas. So now I will invite Isar Najaholi from the National Research Council to say a few.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for this great presentation. I really enjoyed reading the report. I think the research question was chosen very smartly, and it looked at several variables. What I definitely liked about this report was that throughout the report, you acknowledged the complexity of the problem, always talked about limitations. At the end, the recommendations was very nuanced. I had some feedback, but it's very interesting that you addressed all the feedback that you got from reviewers in your presentation. I really appreciate that, especially looking at different groups and how the public policy response might impact some of these variables. All of those have been perfectly addressed in your presentation, and I really liked your visualization tool. So overall, great work. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Isar. So our next team is JPK from the University of Alberta. Precious, Justina, and Coinsola.
Where's Tina? Tina? Okay, just do it. So hi everyone, this is a map of Alberta with Edmonton and Calgary as our two major cities that we have on our
Sorry,
map.
can we start again? I think my audio glitched. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Of course, no pressure. Just start again, take it from the top.
Okay, sorry. This is a map of Alberta with Edmonton and Calgary, our two major cities highlighted in blue. But this map does not only identify those two cities, it's also a map illustrating access to healthcare, post-secondary education, and recreational facilities. This shows us that outside of Edmonton and Calgary, almost every other community in Alberta registers scores of 0, which means unreliable or unavailable access to necessary services for building lives. We weaved our 3 migration story with data to ask the question, how does the cost-access trade-off decide where migrants can study and live in Canada? My parents immigrated to Canada in 2001 from Zimbabwe. Like many, they first settled in Toronto, but due to job competition, they eventually found work in St. Paul, Alberta, a rural town northeast of Edmonton. What happened to us was a common experience for immigrants, being pushed out of urban centers because of high costs, but facing drastically lower access to services. Our analysis shows this trade-off clearly. The figure shows that while central Edmonton reports health access score as high as 0.22, most rural areas, including St. Paul, record scores of 0. That means no walkable healthcare, no transit, and essentially no proximity to essential services. And these are not temporary communities either. Alberta is home to around 1 million first-generation immigrants and over 780,000 second-generation immigrants. And these cannot all be new arrivals. They include well-established populations of immigrants who continue to face critical service gaps because of where they live. This is not a recent trend. It's an ongoing pattern. Many immigrants begin in large cities such as Toronto or Vancouver, but end up in smaller centers due to affordability pressure and increased job competition in metropolitan areas. The tension between where immigrants stay and their consequent service accessibility can be understood better as we break down the data.
Similarly, my family's first stop was downtown Toronto, where almost every refugee-dominant area aligned in blue is centered around hospitals, RRCC, and Service Canada offices and universities. But here's the catch, downtown rents. When these soared past 2,000, staying there for post-secondary became impossible. On these chloroplads of Toronto, each panel shows the access indexes for health, recreation, and post-secondary. The areas where refugee women outnumber economic immigrant women show that there's no significant equity gap in recreation or health, but they score statistically higher in post-secondary with a P-score of 0.03. So education is the first service to disappear when students and families leave these areas. So I opened the map wider and asked, where else in Canada can you actually reach a campus without downtown pricing? And we see the same trend. Every CMA tells the same story. We have that bright core around dense areas of the city with a purple periphery. Refugees cluster in the core because that's where every index peaks for post-secondary. But if you notice out of the 4, Edmonton's access to post-secondary education only tops up around 0.08. So even the affordable cities will give you good access only if you live next to campus. Edmonton was cheaper with tuition and rent in some places, but I wish I knew that I'd be trading that quick walk for a bus if I lived anywhere by that dot. So that means that where access rises, rents follow, which is what Coinsola will talk about next.
When I moved from Lagos to Edmonton, it was because the University of Alberta looked like the most affordable option and the school had a strong reputation. But when I got here, I realized that affordable tuition doesn't cover everything that makes life livable. Finding housing was hard, getting healthcare was confusing, and even finding a job has been a long struggle. If I'm paying this much to be here, why does it feel like everything else is so far away? So I analyzed data comparing average rent to access to post-secondary education across Alberta. The scatter plot shows every area in Alberta as a dot. Along the bottom is the average rent. The bigger and redder the dots, the more non-permanent residents, people like me. Most of us are squeezed into the right corner. The only areas with real access also come with the highest rents. International students either pay $1,400 per month or live over 45 minutes away. In many cases, a good amount of institution revenue comes from international tuition, but we're not seeing that reinvested into housing support, transit, or basic access. Alberta doesn't just have this problem in Edmonton. We also compared this access to other provinces like Quebec, Ontario, and BC. Alberta came last across education, healthcare, and employment access. So it makes you wonder, if we're paying some of the highest fees and helping fund the university system, why is there such a gap in the support and services we get?
Alberta's rural ADAs are not just underprepared for incoming immigrants, they're already failing the communities that they've welcomed. If provinces want to continue benefiting from immigration, they need to put in the work to support the immigrants.
Because at the end of the day, offering affordable tuition isn't enough. If Alberta really wants to attract and keep international students, it has to match the promise with real accessible infrastructure, housing, healthcare, and jobs, not just in downtown cores, but in places we're actually being pushed to.
Our visualizations to inform policymakers on how to prioritize the lowest scoring ADAs in every CMA using an assessment of their collective index scores, investing in transit lines, service gaps, deserts, and also student housing, as well as initiatives to research these findings. Each data point you've seen today, line on the map, is more than just a stat. They tell our story and our past, but they should also serve in shaping our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Team JPK. So now I'd like to invite Feng Hu from Stats Canada to say a few words.
Yeah, when I read this report, I was really impressed by the team's ability to use very creative combination of their own lived experience and data analysis to tell like very interesting story and generate insights. I think like for me, like I have done like data analysis for like, I don't know, 20, 30 years. This is like something I really want my study to be achieved. It's not, you can use data to not in terms of you can apply like a very sophisticated technique skill, but rather you can basically generate insights and like everybody can understand, can relate. And also I'm very impressed with they can like seamlessly switch their analysis like from like a individual experience, very localized analysis to provide a national picture. I think they have like a very strong analysis skill. I'm very happy to see it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So our next team now is Roots from Toronto Metropolitan University. Gabriel, Mishka, and Andrea.
It says that I can't start my video because it's disabled by the host.
Yeah, work on that for you.
I have it now. Thank you.
Yeah, me too.
I have to sign here. How can I? Yeah. And then is it?
I can't turn on my video either.
Gabriel also needs help with his video.
Great, there we go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to close the transfer this. Okay. All right.
Okay, good to begin?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, hi everyone. I'm Mishika and I'm here with my teammates Gabe and Andrea. Today we're excited to share our project, Steps Away, Worlds Apart, the Last Mile Access Gap, a spatial analysis of immigrant access in the Toronto area. Next slide. So when we first started thinking about this project, we kept coming back to one question. What does access really mean, especially when it comes to transit? Toronto is home to thousands of recent immigrants who rely heavily on public transit and walking, but many are settling in suburban areas where housing is more affordable, but walkable, connected transit isn't always there. That's where the last mile gap comes in, the distance between a transit spot and somebody's destination. It might seem small, but it becomes a real big barrier, especially if that means a long walk with groceries or no sidewalk at all. So we focused our project around three key major research questions. One, where do the most severe last mile access gaps exist for recent immigrants across Toronto? Two, how do racialized and newcomer population explain differences in transit access to employment? And finally, how does spatial analysis reveal and understand local access inequalities?
Next slide. To answer our research questions, we used two statistical analyses. First of all, we created something called the Last Mile Gap Index. For this, using GTFS transit location data, we segmented out the ADAs in Toronto, which are located more than 2 kilometers from a major subway or GO transit station. The 5 variables we used were the average distance from the nearest transit station, Statistics Canada's ease of access on foot to healthcare facilities and grocery store variables, and via public transit to work, as well as the proportion of recent immigrants. These variables were normalized using a min-max technique and then were evenly weighted to form the index. We then reran multivariate ordinary least squares regressions with the dependent variable being accessed via public transit to places of employment in order to select variables that were most significant. The tested predictors we used were the Ontario Marginalization Index and the recent immigrant rate. The GWR used the most significant variables to see what their localized effects are in different areas of Toronto. Next slide. The index provided some really intriguing results. Firstly, as can be seen from the results map, most of the downtown core of Toronto is covered under the 2-kilometer transit station buffer, and the immediate surrounding areas also have very low scores for the index. These areas are much closer to the economic center of Toronto, where a large proportion of the major employers are located, meaning that it's easier for people living in these areas to access their jobs via public transit. However, this points to a cyclical phenomenon. Areas closer to the downtown area attract people, which thus entice the city to invest more into public transit and services there, while the areas further afield are neglected and suffer more from the last mile gap effect. For example, more suburban areas such as Scarborough and North Etobicoke, which you can see have much higher index scores, meaning that they have a high proportion of recent immigrants as well as high barriers to accessing transit, services, and employment. These areas are heavily car dependent, which makes it difficult to commute on foot or by bicycle. This is not optimal for recent immigrants, with the high cost of acquiring and maintaining a car being a major barrier for them. More investment in the subway system in these areas is very much needed to suit the many residents that are now arriving. Next slide.
From the geographic weighted regression, from the OLS, only 3 explanatory variables were significant: the material resources, dwelling and structures, and racialized newcomers, which is shown on the large map here. The purple areas are negative coefficients, meaning higher racialized and newcomer populations are associated with lower employment access by transit. This pattern is strongest in Scarborough, North York, and Etobicoke North, matching the areas with the high last mile gap index scores. Green areas like downtown and East York show positive coefficients, where racialized newcomers are associated with better access, which could possibly be due to more equitable transit investments.
So our last mile gap index revealed that areas like Scarborough and Outer Toronto face the greater barriers to transit access for jobs and services. Using OLS and GWR, we found in these areas higher levels of racialization and newcomer status was linked to worse access, while downtown showed the opposite pattern. This shows how spatial and social inequalities overlap, especially where high last mile scores align with high Ontario marginalization scores. The index shows where access is lacking, and GWR helps explain why, supporting the need for equity-focused, localized transit planning. Our findings, next slide, please. So our findings show that transit access is more than just infrastructure. It's about connectivity, affordability, and inclusion. To close last mile gaps, we need equity-focused, place-based solutions like on-demand microtransit, better sidewalks, and community-designed hubs that reflect lived experiences. But we also need to protect against displacement as new infrastructure comes in. This means tools like inclusionary zoning, rent protection, and equity assessments. Moving forward, we aim to integrate additional indicators such as commute times, accessibility for women, seniors, and people with disabilities, as well as population density and transit crowding to help develop a more comprehensive and conclusion understanding of transit access. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Team Roots and Roots. So now I invite Mache from IRCC, or sorry, Hosen, it's going to take from IRCC.
Thank you very much. This is a really interesting and important study. I like how it looks like at the last mile access gap is a very innovative way to examine the question. And the focus on walkability and the transit is very relevant, and using both the OIS and GWR help show how this pattern differ across the neighborhood. I have a couple of I would say suggestions. The first, I feel from your presentation and the date of the paper, I feel that your data might not fully capture the immigrant-specific barrier. It's a pick up the broader pattern tied to the factors for all population, not only for immigrants, but for the Canadian-born, but the immigrants are different, especially for recent immigrants. They're different from the Canadian-born and also the established immigrants. Maybe in your study, you could consider a little bit more for this immigrant-specific experience in the future. And the second, I find the last mile gap index is very creative, innovative. I really like it. But it bundles together a lot of things. Transit, for example, transit distance, access to grocery, access to healthcare. That's very helpful for mapping all of them. But I feel it maybe could potentially hide which specific issue matter most for immigrants trying to get work. In other words, I'm interested to see the weighting for each indicators. Maybe they could have a different weighting. Some factor more important, some factor less important for immigrants. So maybe you can do a little bit more work to break it down and more clearly to clarify this issue that will help make the policy recommendation stronger. And so overall, I think it's a very thoughtful and well done project. I really like it. It's very innovative, use different methods, and I with some improvements in focusing on what matters most for immigrants. I think it will give even better insight for this study and for policymakers. Thank you very much. Good job.
Yeah, thanks so much for the feedback. We'll take that on board. It's super great to get more info on our presentation, which is really good. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So now we are down to the last two teams. Right now, we're going to hear from Team Z from the University of Alberta. So Zara, Derek, and Elam, take it away.
So sorry. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. This is Team Z. My name is Zara, and I'm joined by my colleagues Ellen and Derek. And our presentation is titled Bridging Gaps, Public Transit, Walkability, and Immigrant Access to Amenities in Canada. Next slide, please. So access to amenities such as healthcare, cultural facilities, and recreational centers play a critical role in promoting overall well-being and social integration. However, not all populations in Canada experience the same access to these services. As others, especially when mobility is limited by factors such as income, location, or immigration characteristic. With increasing levels of migration and urbanization, understanding how barriers to access differs between immigrants and non-immigrants is vital to informing equitable policy interventions. So our research will be focusing on how exactly immigrant characteristics influence access to cultural, healthcare, and rec facilities across different transportation modes, so specifically public transit versus walking, in different regions in Canada. Understanding these accessibility patterns is critical to help build and maintain successful settlements across Canada, and we believe that having a firm understanding of this data can help shape future decisions and policies to make access more equitable.
And so, in order to examine this relationship between immigration status and access to facilities, we used a linear regression model with data analyzed at the dissemination area level, along with the 2021 Canadian Index of Multi-Deprivation dataset to contribute to our control variables. Access score, or the likelihood of accessing a facility, was calculated, and all immigrant status variables were z-transformed to ease interpretation. And using this method, we focus on obtaining 3 specific access scores of healthcare, sports and recreation, and cultural arts facilities. We first observed amenity access by province. We considered the factors province, immigrant status, and transit mode to help us obtain data found in Table 1. Our key findings include prairie provinces had the lowest access scores across all categories, regardless of immigrant status or factor. And the next finding was that Ontario and Quebec immigrants actually had significantly higher access to all amenities compared to non-immigrants. And this is represented by the access visual on the left. We then looked at amenity access by immigration class, considering the factors entry class, immigrant status, and transit mode, again depicted in Table 2. The access visualization on the side highlights our key findings, which include, firstly, principal applicants had the highest access scores across all amenities and modes. Next, economic immigrants had better access than non-immigrants consistently. And finally, immigrants consistently scored higher than non-immigrants in transit access. And then finally, we looked at the amenity access by generation and stay duration. The factors considered were generations, years since landing, and transit mode, represented by Table 3. Our key findings include the highest access across all amenities and modes was actually observed among longer settled immigrants, or those who have 25 to 44 years behind them. Next, first-generation immigrants consistently had significantly higher access than later generations. And finally, third-generation immigrants consistently had the lowest access scores across all categories. Oh, Zara, I think your mic is off.
Sorry, thank you. The findings highlight the need for targeted investments to address transportation and service access inequalities among immigrant populations, expanding affordable and accessible public transit in immigrant-dense dissemination areas could significantly improve access to cultural, health, and rec facilities, and these should be focused in the prairie regions as they have the lowest score. Regarding affordable transit for newcomers, a recommendation would be to develop orientation programs that educate newcomers on mobility options in their city or neighborhood, and this could be combined with subsidized transit passes in order to increase confidence in taking advantage of public transit, and third-generation immigrants would highly benefit from this specifically. Urban planning policies that enhance walkability and strategically locate community services can mitigate spatial disparities. Additionally, funding allocations should prioritize high immigrant, low-income areas to ensure equitable access to essential services, and refugee and secondary applicants would benefit from this greatly. Continuous monitoring of transportation and service access indicators stratified by immigration category and duration of residence is critical to evaluating progress and informing evidence-based policy interventions aimed at reducing social and health inequities among immigrant populations. And so this is just a summary slide, sort of summarizing our overall presentation. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now I'd like to invite Haozhen from IRCC to provide a little.
Okay, thank you very much. First, I want to say this is a well-organized, well-done, and thoughtful study. It's a very important and policy-relevant topic, especially as the access to healthcare, cultural facilities, and recreation centers. This will shape the integration and well-being of immigrants. There's a couple of things I want to mention. The first thing is I want to raise is maybe the modeling approach. You rely on the linear regression using the area level data. So while this gives a very helpful regional insight, maybe you could also add a discussion on how relying on aggregate measures might mask individual level differences. For example, not all immigrants in the high access area experience the same ease of access, especially when you account for personal factors like a language barrier, mobility challenges, or income, or some other factors. And also, the study highlights the very interesting, I find it very interesting to see that provincial patterns, like some provinces showing consistently lower access. It will be very helpful to hear more about why this region gaps exist, because it's very policy relevant. Are they mostly due to infrastructure shortage, a policy gap, or settlement patterns? Or this is a very interesting question to us, but I want to see if you have any insight on these kind of issues. And overall, this is a very strong and meaningful study, and it provides very valuable evidence and helpful, I would say, help policymakers better understand where to target resource and reduce access inequalities across immigrant communities. And very interesting. Thank you very much for your good work. Thank you.
If I may, I just wanted to add to Haozhen's comments, and perhaps this comment applies to many teams, and it's around the policy recommendations that are often put forward. When doing so, it's very important to consider the current environmental context in which we're doing the work. So I tried put out a challenge to try and think of solutions within, for example, existing resources. Many solutions are, add, expand, grow. When that is not an option, what is the other solutions, or what are other options that policymakers can consider in order to address some of the issues that you're finding within the research and the data that you're investigating? Thank you.
Thank you. I think I can speak to sort of two of the comments that were made. So one of the things that we were considering when looking into sort of provincial areas, one comment that I don't think we had enough time to sort of look into more was just how do sort of rural and urban areas differ across provinces and how that would affect transportability. And so I know that you mentioned infrastructure. So one of my sort of assumptions, and something that we could look into a little bit more, is how do the prairie provinces differ from like Ontario and Quebec, for example, and just seeing the difference in metropolitan areas in sort of those two sort of areas and seeing how that affects transportability. In addition to the sort of policy recommendations and seeing how things can be amended, one thing that I know from my time back home in Ontario is that there are some sort of outreach methods that some transport sort of companies use. So for example, in Brampton, for example, some of the sort of public transportations do sort of like education in like different areas. And I know Edmonton does something similar as well every now and then, just making people know that transport exists and it's accessible and it's public. So maybe sort of amending that and doing some more targeted outreach to newcomers would be a sort of beneficial thing to do. I'm not sure if either of my teammates have anything that they would want to add to any of the questions or points that were brought up.
Yes, if I might add something on concerning the data analysis, we're limited in the level of the geography. Our unit of analysis, like we rightly mentioned, was a disseminated area. So we try to bring in another data set where we could use variables to control for some of the individual level factors that we would have loved to control, like income that you mentioned and language barrier. So we came in with the Canadian Index of Multiple Deprivation, where we were able to get this domain of economic dependency, where we're trying to like level out the problems of income in our data, so that we have a picture that's representative of maybe the actual situation of the immigrants in that particular dissemination area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great answers. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Team Triple Analytics from Toronto Metropolitan University. So I'd like to invite Nidhi, Maitri, and Alize.
Thank you, Maggie. Good afternoon, judges and fellow panelists. We are Team Triple Analytics. Our presentation today explores how access to essential services like healthcare and education differ for immigrants based on when they arrived in Canada, specifically comparing those who came between 2016 and 2021 with those who arrived before 2016. We look at the question through the lens of spatial accessibility, focusing on whether immigrants settled in areas with high walkability or high public transit access. The chart here provides a high-level comparison of these two groups. On the left, we see the ratio of recent immigrants, the ones who arrived between 2016 and 2021. On the right, we see long-term immigrants who arrived before 2016. What's notable is that while both long-term and recent immigrants are present in high-access areas, long-term immigrants are more concentrated in both walkable and transit-rich regions. Recent immigrants, by contrast, appear to be underrepresented, particularly in high public transit areas. This suggests that newcomers in the most recent wave may face more challenges in accessing key services, challenges that could relate to affordability, housing location, or gaps in infrastructure. Now, my fellow speakers, Maitri and Nidhi, will dive deeper into how these patterns vary across provinces over time and discuss the policy implications there is for supporting more equitable settlement outcomes. We look forward to your questions and insights. Over to you, Maitri.
Thank you, Alize. Hello, everyone. I'll be sharing our analysis of how immigration settlement patterns have changed over time across Canada, particularly in regions with high walkability and transit access. To explore this, we merged census profile data with special accessibility measures like WalkHF and Public EF, where EF refers to education facility and HF means healthcare facility. Using a median split, we identified high access areas and layered in healthcare and education facility data from Statistics Canada for additional context. We then visualized the trends using line graphs and regression plots. The first graph, Alize, could you go to the next slide? Okay. The first graph shows immigration ratios in high walkable regions by province over time. Looking at the graph, we can notice that it seems like Ontario and British Columbia consistently attract the most immigrants, but provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan show notable growth in recent years. In high transit accessible regions, we see similar leaders, Ontario and British Columbia, but Alberta stands out with steady growth, which might reflect investments in transit infrastructure. Territories like Yukon emerged more recently, which may suggest a gradual decentralization. The key takeaway is that both walkability and transit accessibility may influence immigrant settlement patterns. This could mean that with an initiative to improve infrastructure, the provinces are seeing increased newcomer retention beyond major urban centers. This finding suggests that accessibility could be playing a critical role in equitable settlement, and strengthening walk and transit networks could help attract and support immigrants across a wider geographic range. Now, Nidhi will walk us through the impact it might have on immigrant settlement across Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Maitri. Hello, everyone. My name is Nidhi. I'll be walking you through the impact of these patterns on immigrant settlement. So as we explored the data, one thing became clear, that not all immigrants experience the same Canada. Many recent newcomers face real barriers in accessing essential services like schools and clinics. Our analysis shows that long-term immigrants are more likely to live in well-connected neighborhoods with nearby hospitals, schools, and public transit. In contrast, recent immigrants are often concentrated in areas with fewer sidewalks, limited bus access, and longer travel times. This divide doesn't just affect daily routines, it shapes long-term opportunities. When access is limited, everything becomes harder. That's why it's important to think about what can actually be done to close this gap. For instance, safe crossings, good lighting, and proper walkable sidewalks might improve walkable access, connecting transit routes from immigrant-heavy areas to major facilities like education and healthcare, and introducing fair discounts for newcomers, which can help reduce financial burdens for them. And finally, improving housing accessibility by placing affordable homes near public services make everyday access much easier for newcomers. Because when we aim to bridge these divides, we envision finding ways to build a welcoming and inclusive country. On behalf of Team Triple Analytics, thank you all very much. We look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Triple Analytics, for bringing it home. And now a little feedback from Feng Hu from Statistics Canada.
The study did a great job compare the difference between recent immigrant and more established immigrants in their accessibility to facilities. It's important study. It's important area to look into. I think many of the comments Houghton made that to the previous study also apply to this. Like one suggestion I have is to like supplement this like a national provincial study with some localized study, because special access issues are very really different, say across different local communities. That's the only suggestion I have.
Thank you, Feng. So now the judges are going to pop out to deliberate and decide on who the winners are. I just want to say I'm so impressed with how thoughtful and deeply reflective all the presentations were. Despite having only 7 days to prepare, you really were able to take data to tell unique stories about migration and to actually provide some policy relevant recommendations. So kudos to all the teams. We really hope that this work has planted the seeds for future research. Obviously, you can't solve the world's problems in 7 days, but we are here at Bridging Divides to take you to the next steps. And we hope that you will continue to pursue these lines of inquiry with the Bridging Divides program. So at this point, I'm going to invite Jessica to launch the poll for the Audience Choice Award. I believe that she set it up in order of the way that the teams presented. So please vote for your favorite team, and the winners will be announced at the end. While you vote and while the judges deliberate, I'm going to invite the mentors to say a few words. So this challenge, like we mentioned at the beginning, was only available due to the incredible dedication and work of many, many people, our incredible judges, but also our incredible mentors who volunteered their time and tutored the teams throughout the experience. So we're going to hear from some of these incredible mentors. First, I'd like to introduce Andrew Parkin. He's the Executive Director of Environics Institute and a sessional lecturer at the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the University of Toronto. Andrew, please say a few words.
Okay, hi everyone, and I would like to echo the sentiment that all those presentations and all that work was incredibly impressive. So thanks to everyone. So Mikey, you want 5 minutes on kind of what I do and how the mentoring went?
Yeah, I'd love to hear about Environics. Tell us a little bit how you use data to inform what you do, and then maybe a little bit about the experience you had mentoring the team.
Sure, and I got a timer running here, so I don't go on too long. So I run the Environics Institute, which is a very small, not-for-profit organization that does public opinion research. So we survey Canadians about what they think about the major issues facing the country and the way the country's changing. So I work with data all the time, all day, every day. Um, I'm probably different from a lot of people on this call, the other judges and mentors and so on, because I work really broad and not really deep with data. So what I mean by that is I'm looking at, different studies on a lot of different topics. Just even this week, I'm writing reports on how Canadians feel about public education, how they feel about the evolution of childcare policy, what they think of American tariffs on Canadian goods, how they feel the government is doing, how they feel about their sense of national pride, what they think of different education options for preparing for the labor market. That's a lot of different ground to cover, and it's a lot of fun. I think maybe what I'd say is, what I learn about working with data is numbers never speak for themselves. I think you all know that the way you tried to bring your work alive, but that's what I spend a lot of time doing. My numbers don't answer any questions. I need to think of how to tell the story. So I interrogate the numbers to try and find what the story is, but then it's up to me to then translate that into something. And I use that word translate a lot, right? We're not translating language, but we're translating numbers into stories. So what I spend my time on is trying to think of what I'm learning by looking at the data, but then how can I share that with much wider audiences who are not going to get into the data, but want to know what I'm finding, which again reflects sort of what Canadians are thinking and how the country's changing. Maybe the last thing, well, maybe two things I'll add about that. Of course, one of to make I guess to be as effective as possible, what people like me really have to do is understand where the public conversations are going. So what are the issues? What are different groups, political groups, community groups, what are the positions they're taking? What are the stakes of these discussions? We really need to know the context, because when you know the context that's out there, you can think of, again, what story to tell, right? How do you need to present things? I'm coming back to my point that the numbers don't speak for themselves. So we can do different things with them, and we need to kind of dock, I guess. We need to build a bridge between what we're looking at and what are people expecting to see, what's going to surprise them, what's going to reassure them, and so on. So knowing the context in which these discussions are unfolding is kind of as important as knowing your own data. And then the last thing is just quickly, I spend a lot of time, of course, because we write the surveys. We design the surveys. We think about what we can survey about, what we can ask people. And that involves spending a lot of time thinking about what it's fair to ask people, what we can expect people to be able to tell us, and what that really reflects about the reality that they live in. That's not always self-evident. There's a lot of things we would like to know, but that it's really difficult to get to from survey research. Maybe I'll just park that there, but we spend a lot of time thinking about the tools, right? How can we discover things, and how can we ensure that's reliable? So just briefly on the mentoring, I interacted with JPK, the group from the University of Alberta. Hi, everyone. You did great, and it was a pleasure to have a few moments with you. So what I learned is they're really impressive. And really smart and really passionate and really motivated, and I was really impressed. But it's funny, I actually had the same reflection on their work that Feng had when he gave his comments, which is what was really interesting was the interaction between their lived experience and the data. The reason we do empirical research is to get past anecdotes, right? So we don't just rely on our own stories, we validate that. But at the same time, we can't leave our own stories behind, right? That's what informs our thinking. That's what drives our questions. That's what drives the relevance of the work that we do. So I really appreciated the way that that group, JPK, did that back and forth between what they had experienced and what people in their families and their other social circles had experienced, and what they can learn with the data and interrogate those two things back and forth. So thanks for the work that you did, and thanks, Maggie, for having me.
Thank you so much, Andrew. So next, I'd like to invite Craig Damian Smith. Craig is the founder of Parity, and I invite you, Craig, to say a few words about what Parity does and about your experience mentoring.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me to be part of the competition and the project. I mean, I used to be on the staff of the CERC doing research on global migration governance in my trainings as a political scientist. But as Maggie said, I left to focus full time on our organization called Parity a couple of years ago. So Parity is a Canadian and European organization, and we're a mix of social and data scientists and technology experts and engineers and people who work in government relations. And our goal is to strategically and ethically use tech data and social science to improve and scale matching solutions for predominantly we work in international mobility, but we also work in other social impact sectors as well. So we build data architecture and matching algorithms to help destine and improve the relocation and settlement of whether that's refugees who are going to be resettled, asylum seeker redistribution within countries or between countries. And other work that we do involves really quite technically complex data imports and data integrations with UNHCR data, big kind of government databases, and then also collecting original data from sponsors and cities on reception conditions, and then we use that to inform these matching algorithms that we've developed. The reason why we want to do this is because we're applying, social scientific theories around how optimizing matching and things like that enhance integration and settlement and social cohesion. But it also increases kind of like operational efficiency, reduces bias, and a big reason for what we do is that we use algorithms that are preference ranking and preference matching algorithms in order to kind of build in the agency of the stakeholders who are involved in these things. And we work across North America and Europe. And just one more point on kind of like what we do and how it connects to this is that we, try to solve for these like really big complex data problems. So say we have a matching cohort of 50 refugee households that are going to be matched with 50 community sponsorship groups. Depending on the project, we have like 80 to somewhere between 80 to 200 independent variables in there. So if there's a match cohort of 50 and 50 on each side, that means we have to run 2 million to 5 million match calculations every time. So this is like kind of complex and complicated and quite niche stuff. But what we need to do with the government and civil society partners that we work with is explain the how and the why of the data. And then also the other big thing that we do is measure the outcomes kind of longitudinally. So when I think I met with 4 or 5 teams, and I was immediately struck by how smart everybody was, but also immediately struck by the fact that they were first coming at it from kind of like a stats and data science perspective. I won't repeat what Andrew and Fang have said, but that I found that almost immediately that the topic of the conversation for me, or where I wanted to steer the conversation, was instead of talking about whatever statistical methods you're going to use and how you're going to do your regressions, to think about why you're coming to this story. So some of the groups were saying, well, after a bit of conversation, it was, well, our team came to Canada through these 3 different immigration pathways, yet we're all now in the same place. Do we kind of deviate from the norm? Or are we representative of like a convergence after X number of years or something like that? And so in the future, I really hope that this challenge continues, because I think it's really worthwhile, and kind of helping students think about that kind of more social science method of this, or at least kind of like orientation towards it. If the data first, if the observations from the data offer some kind of puzzle, then just being curious about what that puzzle says, and being able to kind of translate the analytic portion of it to policy relevant, or public relevance, and be able to tell that story in a compelling way that doesn't leave the authors or the researchers out of the question and assume some kind of like objective stance on it, because that's never going to be the case, and nor is that as compelling, I think, in terms of a public policy application, as being open and embracing the subjectiveness kind of how you're coming at the data and the project. I think that's it. I'll just one more anecdote is that I also teach a course at the Monk School. I teach this course called Public Policy for Engineers. And as a social scientist and public policy person who comes to this, and I'm supposed to be the one like teaching about public policy to groups of students who almost have no previous engagement with public policy, I'm consistently struck by how little I know, and how kind of impressive engineering students and computer science students analytic frameworks and ways of thinking are. So I think this is like a really wonderful way to kind of bridge the two, and I had a really great time as a mentor learning from the students as well.
Thanks so much, Craig. Next up, I want to invite Ada Radanchik to say a few words. Ada is a statistical and research analyst for the Government of Ontario. Tell us a little bit about what you do and how your experience was mentoring.
Thanks for the introduction, Maggie. So I'm Ada. I work in education analytics within the policy and planning division at the Government of Ontario. So we explore and analyze education data of students from JK to grade 12 in Ontario, basically to help inform and support the policies that you guys see play out in schools across the province. So me, like I come from a social sciences and critical theory heavy background from the University of Toronto. I actually ended up making a career change into data analytics after completing a big data and predictive analytics program here at TMU. I was especially excited to participate in this challenge, as interdisciplinary studies have been a huge part of my own journey and career. Knowing how valuable this experience would be for all of you made me so excited for you guys to have the opportunity to partake in and explore, richer and more holistic approaches that I am so confident will be instrumental to shaping and redefining your skill sets. It really was a pleasure serving as a mentor in this challenge. The groups of students I had the privilege of working with were exceptionally talented, so sharp. You guys, you really demonstrated this like intellectual curiosity that really just energized me, and it made me miss being a student by the end of the week. So I was really impressed by the depth of thought, that was brought to our discussions, and being able to see like all the ideas and things that we talked about materialize and come to life here in this final showcase was just so fantastic. I guess what stood out to me the most in this experience was your willingness to engage with the data in ways that might have been outside of your comfort zones. You know, there was this kind of genuine openness and curiosity that I witnessed towards expanding your understandings of how data can be harnessed to have a real impact on lived experiences. And, you know, I really want to emphasize and echo that point. It's not just about the numbers, it's not just about the statistics. These data points are real people. They're having real experiences in the world, and it's so important to not lose sight of that in your work. I really hope that this openness and curiosity you brought in this challenge is something that you all hold on to in the future, throughout your schooling, throughout your career paths, as it will be absolutely invaluable to you at every corner of your own journeys. You know, you all did an incredible job here. Congratulations to all of you, and good luck.
Thank you so much, Ada. And for our last mentor, I'd like to invite Vaidehi Adedoria. She is a research assistant here at CERC Migration, Toronto Metropolitan University.
Thank you, Maggie. Hello, everyone. I am Vaidehi Adedoria. I'm a data science researcher at CERC Migration, where I have been working on different projects where I use machine learning to study migration and its impact. As Ada says, the data is just not a number. It's a lens to understand lives, communities, and change. I was thrilled to join the Migration Data Challenge as a mentor for the first time. It was a chance to share what I have learned and also learn from the students. So when I last week I spoke to students about the two data sets, one with the immigration related socio-demographic data, and another with the special access measure like distance to healthcare, schools, and jobs. I encourage everyone to start by exploring the variables in both data sets, especially the immigration and access indicator, to really understand what each means. This help make sure any analysis is meaningful and accurate. The students were curious about linking the external data set also, how to tell a clear story and their findings. What stood out to me was their focus not just running the models, but on making the result useful for the public and policymakers. Their creativity and commitment to ethical, impactful data science was truly inspiring. And I was also happy to see the triple analytic teams as I talked to them. So congratulations to all the team and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the judges are still deliberating. You've given them a lot to think about. So while we wait, I would love to invite some of the teams, anyone to just kind of say a few words about their experience, what drew you to the challenge. Yeah. Maybe I'm just going to call someone out. Don't be mad at me, but how about Team McCrispy?
It looks like someone has their hand up.
Ah, okay, fantastic. No need to raise hands. Just jump on in.
Oh, thanks, Ada, for that. Yeah, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Ada, Craig, and Andrew. They were our mentors for our project in JPK. They helped us a lot in terms of visualizing our ideas and our stories and helping to put that story together. This was a great opportunity in terms of like jumping in and just throwing our hat in there. We're still undergrads and finishing up our third year. And so this was something that we were like, you know, we don't have that much experience, but let's try our hand at it. And it was amazing to learn the different things that the data was able to tell about our stories and know the possible impacts that it could have in terms of the groups that we come from, but are also living in the areas that we live as well. demonstrating our lived experiences and the things that we have to go through on a day-to-day as like students living in a different country and province. But like I said to our mentors, again, a huge thank you, because they really took the time to help us walk through our ideas and understand what we needed to get done. And thank you to the organizers of this event, because we were able to come together and work with our team. We're not all from the same degree as well. So that was really fun for us to get to work together as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Precious. Can I invite anybody else, any other takers, just to say a few words about your experience while the judges come to their conclusions?
I'd like to say a few words. I just wanted to share that doing this challenge was like a new opportunity for me. Like this was my first time doing something like this. And I'm very interested in data science. So just getting this kind of exposure to working with a data set that actually had an impact was great, honestly, for me. And being an immigrant myself, I felt like I could relate to these statistics. Like I felt like they were not just numbers. Like it actually does, like there's a face behind each number. And I was like, it really speaks to me, being an immigrant myself. And I'm really excited to work with more similar data sets and like look at the insights that they show us. Thank you.
Are there any teams out there that haven't engaged with migration data? Is this maybe your first time ever looking at topics related to migration?
Yeah, I'd say for us, this was definitely our first time, well, at least for me, my first time doing something like this. And as people have said before, I just need to thank you to like the mentors, especially Ada, because I feel like when we first started and when we were given the data, it was a lot. And I was like, we were very confused. Okay, where do we even start from? And she really helped help us create like a vision of what we want to do, because we just gave her our idea and what we wanted to do, and she helped us with like some tips. And I feel like the process and of when we did the analyzing of the data and everything, we really learned a lot, especially with our findings, because I know you're not supposed to go in with your own preconceived ideas, but we had like thoughts of what exactly our findings were going to reveal. And then when we got our results, we were shocked and we were like, oh, okay, that's not exactly what we thought, which is like very interesting. And I'm happy to say that I really learned a lot, and this was like a very interesting experience, and I'm glad I was able to participate in it.
Thanks so much for sharing, Temi. Anyone else care to say a few words?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, thanks.
First of all, thank you to TMU and the bridging program and to our mentors, because it was a quite short period that we had to work on this data set, and added to that, it had a lot of things in mind. And thanks to our mentor Ida, Sarah, and Hari for like we were in a mindset of having a deductive approach. Like we had the portal in hand, but just need to bring up a lot of things into it. So I think their guidance was immensely valuable. And yeah, we three of us are from TMU data science background, so it was a real time experience in working in this immigration data set, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks so much for sharing. Anybody else care to say a few words? Clearly, you've given the judges a lot to think about. We had 20 minutes allotted, but it's taking longer. So your presentations have made an impact. Anybody else?
Yeah, I also wanted to add a few words. I really just want to thank the mentors for how prompt the responses were, because like everyone mentioned, there were certain times where we're a bit confused and we needed more clarity, and we guess like needed some guidance. And initially we thought it was going to take a bit of time to kind of like, you know, get to the mentors and then for them to come back to us. But I just appreciate how prompt they were with the responses and how clear they were as well with their responses, because it was easy to conceptualize our idea as like I'm pretty sure a lot of teams can testify too. So I just want to thank you all so much for that and just for this experience, because it was really a learning curve. Because like everyone else has mentioned, I've never really done something like this before. So it was interesting pulling the data sets together, forming conclusions, and just seeing the nuanced ways that data can be manipulated. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much. I just got a message from the judges that it's hard. So we're gonna keep waiting. They are super close. I don't know how they're gonna decide. Andrea, did you want to say a few words?
Yeah, I for this competition, I haven't really had to work and do one of these data migration challenges before, but it was really great to see and like use data in a way that relates back to like our stories and our experiences and stuff. Like when my family came over from Indonesia, they had to like try to they had to like escape from Chinese anti-Chinese law laws that were happening in Indonesia at the time. So us coming to Canada, it was really hard to always like find housing and having to then like find and then having to then walk to different housing options to then just be denied because we didn't have like the things that are needed. This experience was really like healing in a way to make sure to see how basically to see how the Statistics Canada data sets that they are making are going to be able to make a huge and profound impact on the people for future reference and making sure that things aren't hopefully aren't going to be gentrified and instead have more equity based planning in mind. And yeah, I'm also very thankful for everyone who has been here. Thank you for setting all of this up. And to our mentors, Sarah and Sangapala, they were really helpful in making us try to narrow down our vision. And yeah, there was those, yeah, I feel like I'm just echoing what everyone else is saying. Like it was so hard to like narrow down our focus and then make only the report be 1,500 words, right? So it gives me good notes for the next time we do these things. But yeah.
Thank you so much. Error 404, data not found.
Hi. I have always said that we like schools and universities need more challenges that force us to think interdisciplinarily, because I know that there are challenges like, hackathon that, mostly like computer science and engineers can participate in. But like this challenge, it really forces us to think outside the box. Like, how does data, like data is basically people. How are we thinking about people in terms of a way that we can measure and really like busting myths, like with numbers? There's nothing like we can't bust an entire myth in a week, but we can at least try. But finding support that, this myth that is causing a lot of people like a lot of stress, and it may even be like the basis of a lot of discrimination. Looking at data that says, hey, like this myth could be incorrect. I feel like, me as an immigrant has definitely surprised me. And I don't know, like it just reminds us that like not everything is what we seem, and like not everything is how it seems, and the media can portray a narrative that isn't necessarily true. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Kristen?
Yeah, this is Mac Crispy speaking. So how we found out about this competition was very interesting. So like all three of us are like roommates, and one of us found it on social media, but like none of us, actually like two of us aren't from any like data background. So except for Song studies statistics, I study business and Jada studies sociology. But so we at first we found like the data set really confusing and challenging, but I would say it's still a very credible learning journey, especially with the help of our mentor Sarah. And I just wanna like thank everyone for putting this competition together. Yeah.
Thanks so much. So I've just gotten the call that the judges have come to their final decision. I think it was difficult, but I'd like to invite, maybe in reverse order, how about we start with best visualization first? Isa?
So I'm very happy to announce that the Best Visualization Award goes to Nexus Navigators for the informative and interactive visualization tool that they built in such a short amount of time. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Nexus Navigators. Okay, and next prize will be the best use of external data. And I'd like to invite Maciej and Hausen to announce that.
I just noticed that there are a number of Hausens currently listed. I don't, anyway, so drum roll, I guess, for best use of external data. It's Roots and Roots.
Congratulations, Roots and Roots. And for the final top prize for the best overall submission, drum roll, Feng.
The best prize goes to GPK for its amazing ability to bring data to alive. For create like a very interesting story from the like a quite boring data set.
Thank you so much and congratulations. So we do have one more award to announce. Thank you to all of those who voted for the Audience Choice Award. And I'd like to invite Ron to announce the Audience Choice Award.
So the Audience Choice Award goes to TEAA. Thank for their great presentation and the support on this webinar. And thank you all the teams. They were really, really good presentations. A lot of amazing work in such a short amount of time.
So that concludes the first inaugural Migration Data Challenge. Thank you all for your incredible hard work. We really hope that you continue and dive deeper into what you've started here. For anyone who is interested in pursuing the work further, we'd love to connect you with researchers doing work at Bridging Divides. So please don't hesitate to contact us. Really, I'm so amazed by what you've been able to do in just 1 week. So if this is what you can do in a week, I can't wait to see what you can do in the longer term. Thank you to everyone who helped make this possible. Again, thank you to all our amazing judges. Thank you to our incredible mentors. And thank you to Bridging Divides and CFREF, the Tri-Agency Council, for the grant that sustains this programming. That's it. Congratulations and see you all soon.